Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
When I first saw Aaron, he was lying on the floor of the Thompsons' bedroom, still as death. "Hey, are you okay?" I prodded him with my toe. Then I crouched down and shook him like mad until his eyes fluttered open. "Don't do that!" he yelled in my face. His breaths were panicked and fast, as if he'd just come up from underwater. A rustling noise came from the other side of the room, and I noticed there were several other people sprawled out across the floor. "Sorry," I said. "I thought you were passed out." "No, I was sleeping." "Everyone else is out there drinking and dancing, and you're sleeping?" "Not sleeping," one of the girls piped up. "Astral projecting." Seriously? I'd heard the stories. I didn't believe them, of course, but I'd heard them. In the past several months, all kinds of wild stories had popped up, especially on internet forums and amateur websites. Some of the stories were wonderful, like the girl suffering from macular degeneration who said it let her see for the first time in years. Others were terrifying, like the teenage girl who realized one of her classmates was using it to spy on the girls' locker room. Others were just confusing, like the woman who preferred astral plane to real life. Now her family waits by her bedside, watching her comatose body, waiting for her to come back home. "Does it work?" I asked. "Yeah, and it's wonderful," Aaron said. His ocean blue eyes met mine, and he smiled. "You should join us." "No thanks. It's far better than dancing to crappy music and drinking cheap beer." I wasn't drinking. I was talking to people. Well, this is much better than talking to people. You'll soar among the clouds, see the stars up close, swim in the ocean without ever coming up for air. It's the best thing in the world. Aaron's voice rippled with excitement as he talked. For a moment, I was tempted to just lie down on the filthy carpet with him and try it out for myself. But I couldn't. "Maybe some other time," I told him. I left the bedroom. As I walked down the hall, though, footsteps sounded behind me. I turned to see Aaron following. "What are you doing?" He shot me another hypnotizing smile. "I changed my mind. There is something better than astral projection." "What?" "You." I laughed. "Nice pickup line there. Come on, you liked it." He shot me a wink. "I'm Aaron." "Billy." We took a seat in the corner of the room, away from the thrashing mass of teenagers in the center. "Do you go to Glenmont High? I haven't seen you around before," I said, over the music. "I'm new. My family just moved here from Pennsylvania." "Oh, do you like it here?" "Yeah, A scream rang out, above the music. Then a girl broke through the crowd, face red, eyes wet with tears. "He won't wake up!" she screamed. "He just won't wake up!" Aaron leapt up and ran back to the bedroom. I followed. Several people crowded around a still form on the floor. Aaron pushed through them. "Eric, can you hear me?" he shouted, shaking him. "Eric, hey, come on!" He didn't respond. Aaron thrust a hand under his back. In one quick, strong motion, he pushed him up. Eric's eyes shot open. He began to cough. "He's okay. He's okay. Eric began to cough. Aaron smacked him on the back. That's it, Eric. You're okay. My pounding heart filled with admiration. Aaron wasn't just handsome and kind. He was a hero. The next few weeks were a blur. Aaron texted me every day, and we often stayed up until the wee hours chatting. He'd tell me about his experiences traveling, his excitement at us being together. My brother Finnis didn't approve. He and Aaron were both seniors. He's too old for you, Finnis would say. He's kind of weird, hangs out with that astrological spiritual crowd. I didn't see him like that. I was falling in love. We'd been dating for almost a month when Aaron brought up astral projection again. So I don't want to pressure you or anything, but I was wondering if you'd project with me. I turned to him, frowning. I don't know, Aaron. It seems dangerous. After what happened to Eric, that was his fault. He didn't have a partner. You always project with a partner in case something goes wrong. I don't know, Aaron. It's not really my thing. But you've never tried it. His blue eyes took on that faraway look. The same look I'd seen when he was driving me home that very first night. Come on, Billy. It'll be romantic. We'll soar on the clouds together. But just last week, some woman projected for several hours, and some people are saying that she isn't the same. Like she's possessed or something. That's like 1 out of thousands. Besides, you've got someone with tons of experience to pull you back if anything goes wrong. He looked into my eyes again. Please. It would mean so much to me. I sighed. Okay, I'll try it. He grinned, gently holding my hand. He guided me into the bedroom. Go ahead and lie down on the bed, on your back. I quirked an eyebrow at him. You better not be trying anything. He laughed and lay down next to me. Just a few things to remember. Before we start, first, don't lose sight of me, okay? I'll be keeping you safe. Second, if anything looks off, don't approach it. There are things in the astral plane that you don't want to interact with. Third, we can't stay longer than an hour. The longer you stay, the harder it is to come back. That's not encouraging. He turned to me, blue eyes locked on mine. I will be with you every step of the way, Billy. You're going to be fine, okay? Okay. Now, close your eyes and relax. Fade out all of the sounds and sights around you. If you feel a heavy, tingling feeling as if you're falling asleep, that's when you want to act. Imagine you're being pulled out of your body by a rope or climbing up a ladder. This is so weird. Just try it. I closed my eyes and tried to relax. Within 10 minutes, I felt the heavy, tingling feeling that he described. I imagined a sort of endless ladder sticking out of my abdomen, and then me climbing up it out of my body. A pop filled my ears, and then I was staring down at myself. Holy crap, I said, but it came out as more of an ethereal echo, vibrating through space itself. Can't believe you did it on your first try. I turned to see Aaron hovering beside me. He looked the same, except his clothes and body were washed in neon, as if he were standing under a black light. When he smiled, his teeth glowed brightly. Are you ready? I guess. He took my hand and pulled. We soared right up through the roof, higher and higher into the sky, until the town below shrunk to tiny pinpricks of light. Watch for your tether. I looked down to see a white string coming out of my chest. It extended down into the darkness far below, like some sort of ghostly umbilical cord. What is that? The thing that tethers you to your body. But you don't have one. With enough practice, you don't need one. You just snip it off. He reached for my hand again and tugged. Come on, let's go. I didn't reply. Something had caught my eye. An orange light in the distance, shimmering and flickering between the mountains. What's that? What's what? Aaron asked, scanning the landscape. The light. As I spoke, it started to grow. A glint turned into a flame. A flame grew into a river of orange. It bled toward the town at frightening speed. Puffs of black smoke clouded the sky, blocking out the moon. Aaron, is that fire? He didn't reply. He just stared at me with those ocean blue eyes. The orange reached the first few houses at the edge of town. As soon as it touched them, they burst into flame. Then it spread further into town, pooling in the roads and crevices. As soon as it came into contact with a house, it just burst. It burst into flames. Then came the screams. Horrible, shrill screams of pain, rising up from the town like a chorus. Aaron! Aaron! I yelled over the sound. Please, do something! Then I was falling, fast and hard, yanked forward by the cord in my chest. The cold air quickly warmed as I neared the town. The orange light licked my face. I closed my eyes. My scream joined the others. Thump! My eyes flew open. Aaron, we have to get out of here. The fire! The fire! Billy. It's okay. He wrapped his arms around me. The window outside was dark and cold. Not a single flicker of light. But the fire... Just your imagination. He pulled away from me, ran his hand through my hair. Sometimes if you're not totally relaxed, if you're stressed or distracted, your own thoughts can pollute the experience, especially the first few times. Why didn't you tell me that? I didn't want to scare you. I thought maybe I'd say no. He sighed. I just wanted to have fun with you, Billy. I grabbed my things and stormed out. Then I went to sleep, fuming mad. We spent a few days in silence. No texts, no calls, no emails. Finally, I broke down and drove to his place. After 5 minutes of knocking, he opened the door. Billy. As soon as he saw me, those ocean blue eyes lit up as if the sun was hitting the water. I'm so sorry. He pulled me into a hug. The two of us stood there on his doorstep, hugging each other, like we were afraid the other might slip away at any moment. I love you, Billy. I love you too, Aaron. For the next few months, our relationship was incredible. We spent our days exploring town and our nights looking up at the stars in Groveland Park. It was on one of those nights, around 1 a.m., that astral projection came up again. We should be getting back, shouldn't we? You go on ahead, Aaron said, stretching out on the blanket. I'm going to sleep out here tonight. I want to astral project again, see the stars up close. Okay, good night. I started across the grass. The park was so quiet, so empty at this time of night. I thought of my bed, too. Empty at home, without Aaron. I turned around. Actually, I'll stay here with you. His eyes lit up. Really? I want to see the stars with you. I took a deep breath and squeezed his hand. I'll try it just this one more time, for you. We lay back in the grass. The sky hung over us, scattered with stars. Aaron reached for my hand, and we closed our eyes. It came quicker this time, the tingling, the heavy feeling. It all came on within minutes. I felt my spirit peeling off my body, lifting out of the ground. Then I was hanging in the night air, looking down at our bodies below. Wow, that was quick, Aaron said. Practice makes perfect, I guess? The park shrunk away as the two of us soared up towards the stars. You're so much more beautiful up here, see? But I wasn't looking at the stars. I was looking down at the forest. Something was wrong. The trees were shaking, swaying, knocking into each other. A few toppled to the ground. What's happening down there? I don't know. The trees roiled and quaked, as if something immense was passing through. Is something in there? I asked. Crack! An immense shadow stepped out of the forest, thick and tusked like an elephant, lithe and graceful like a jaguar. It crossed over the park in quick, rapid strides. The earth shook underneath its feet. Aaron, what is that? Crack! The field tore open under its feet. Grass gave way to a fissure of rock, dirt, and darkness, just several feet from where our comatose bodies were. The figure had stopped in the middle of the park, sniffing the air. We have to get back, Aaron. We have to. I stopped. Aaron was hovering a few feet below me, holding my tether in one hand and a knife in the other. What are you doing? But I was too late. The knife touched the tether. Immediately, a shockwave of pain rippled through my body. I yanked away from him, but he held fast to it. I snapped back as if on a leash. Aaron! I want you to be here with me forever. He slashed at the tether again. I screamed in pain. Crack, crack, more fissures erupted underneath me. The whole world shook. Another sharp pain stung in my chest. And then I was floating, drifting away as if blown by some invisible current. Aaron, help! I screamed and the world started to blur and shift. My tether was gone. I looked around wildly, at the shaking, splitting ground, at the swaying trees. Where is my body? Where is it? There. A speck of white among the dark grass. I forced myself to fall towards it. With every fiber of my being, I concentrated on that speck of white among the blurry, shaky landscape. The current tugged at me, trying to pull me away. I wouldn't let it. With a pop, I opened my eyes. The sky lay above me. The earth no longer shook. I scrambled up. A hand grabbed my ankle hard and yanked me back. Aaron, what are you doing? Let me go. He didn't reply. He just stared at me, his ocean blue eyes burning with anger. I yanked as hard as I could. Then I ran. I sprinted through the park, past the trees to the car. Aaron's footsteps thundered behind me. I yanked the door open and dove inside. I pressed the locks just as Aaron's hand hit the handle. Let me in, Billy. No, I sobbed. You were trying to hurt me. Why? Aaron, why? Come on, Billy. You're scaring me, I said through the glass. Please, just go. I just wanted us to be together. Why did I see those horrible things in? The monster, the cracks in the earth, the fire? It's the future, Billy, he sighed, as if what he was saying truly pained him. Humanity has sinned against the earth far too much, for far too long. We break through the gates, cleanse the earth, and start it anew. We? Who's we? us on the astral plane. You aren't making any sense. Didn't you ever wonder why I don't have a tether? The pieces slowly fit together in my mind. No. You're possessing Aaron? I filled with anger. Get out of his body. He's mine. You can't take him away from me. I pounded the glass and screamed. No, I am Aaron. But this body, it belongs to some guy in Nevada named Derek. My heart plummeted. What? Don't worry. You, Billy, don't have to suffer like the rest. You're one of the good ones. We'll stay in the astral plane while the rest of the world burns. I just want to go home. His expression turned angry again. Home? What's there for you? At home? Your brother? Your parents? I nodded. Then I'll bring them with us. What? No, Aaron! He took off across the park. He lay down in the center of the lawn on the rumpled blanket where we had held hands just an hour before. I leapt out of the car and ran. I didn't stop until I was standing in front of my house, weak and breathless. I ran in the door and ran up the stairs. Mom! Dad! Finis! I shouted. I ran into the master bedroom first. Mom and Dad lay on the bed, silent and still. Mom! I yelled. I grabbed her shoulders and shook her. Mom, please, wake up! Nothing. Dad? I ran out of the room. Finis! Finis! I shouted as I ran down the hall. Finis lay in bed, his body jerked and twitched wildly. Finis! I grabbed him by the shoulders and shook him. Finis, please, wake up! He fell still. Then he rubbed his eyes. Billy? Oh, thank God. Finis, we need to get help. Mom and Dad won't wake up. We need to get them out of here before... I stopped. His eyes had fluttered open, and they were a bright ocean blue. Hello again, Billy.
Yes, I can see people's auras, and I hate saying it so bluntly. It makes me sound like some hack psychic who fakes the ability as a means of exploitation and a paycheck. I've never made money from my ability. I've never taken advantage of it, and until now, I've never spoken of it to anybody. But I really do see them, and I'm starting to view it as more of a curse. I have a reason for typing this out, and I assure you there isn't a happy ending. For me, it's quite simple. I see a faint light surrounding people, everyone, and in that light I can see their morality. The brighter and more translucent the light is, the better the person. The darker and opaquer, the worse. Dim and partly translucent are morally ambiguous. To simplify things, those are the three ways I describe them. Dark equals evil. Bright equals good. Dim equals somewhere in between. It's strange, I've always viewed the people with gray, dim auras as arbiters, mediators, the people in between who aren't one or the other and will always have difficult decisions to make. I was a child when I first became aware of my gift. It didn't take long to figure out that the brighter auras were kinder to me and selfless. While both of my parents are good people, my father's aura was quite a bit brighter than my mother's. As a result, he was always far more patient and understanding with me. It was clear to see that my teachers and my fellow students with brighter auras were usually friendlier and more compassionate. The dark auras were the stereotypical fighters, lunch money stealers, and bullies. I would say I was around 8 years old when I fully figured out that I have a gift that most people don't have, that possibly nobody else has. I've read some of the New Age websites and alternative medicine articles that give their take on aura reading. While I believe that the vast majority of it is bullshit, I expect there must be at least some other people out there with my ability. So I don't want to completely dismiss those people as an outright hoax. It's just that, for me, it doesn't work anything like the way those websites describe. I visited numerous aura readers and psychics. Most of them have dim or dark auras themselves, and I'm certain they don't really hold this power. I'm not saying all psychics are terrible people. I visited a few who had very bright auras. They were unable to convince me that they really have psychic powers, but at the very least, used their deception to try and help people. You need to understand, I'm going to end this entry by sharing a terrifying event that is happening to me. But before I get to that, I think there are a few more things I need to explain. I imagine many of you are curious as to what type of aura is the most common. I'm happy to tell you that the majority of people are somewhere between dim and bright. I see very few dark auras. This isn't scientific, and I haven't traveled the world plotting out charts and graphs, but I'd estimate around 60% of people are bright-ish, around 25% dim-ish, leaving just around 15% darkish. Again, these are just estimates. What's the precise difference between, say, bright and dim? I have no idea, but rest assured there is far more bright in the world than dark. The next thing I'd like to discuss is children. I can see a person's aura right from birth, and I've never encountered an aura changing as someone ages. I'm not sure what this means for the whole nature versus nurture debate, and I'm not saying that everyone with a dark aura always behaves terribly or vice versa. A person with a bright aura might be born in horrible conditions, acquire a drug problem, and then resort to thievery to feed their addiction. I think the difference is this. A bright aura thief with a horrible upbringing may rob someone, but they would never intentionally hurt someone in the process. A dark aura thief would kill someone if they could get away with it without even a second thought. Another interesting note. I find the ratio between bright, dim, dark to be similar across pretty much all human activities. Whether I'm at a church or a death metal concert, it always seems to be around that same 60%, 25%, 15% ratio. I once visited a federal prison and was shocked to see that at least half the prisoners had bright auras. I had to be at the prison in person to see this because I can't see auras on photographs, television shows, movies, or even in mirrors. I can only see auras in the real world. Another strange thing, I can't even see my own aura. I assume and hope I would be on the brighter spectrum, but I can't see it. The brightest person I ever saw worked as a social worker. She shone so bright that it was difficult for me to even look at her. Based on the way people acted in her presence, I think that almost everyone around her could sense her brightness in a subconscious way. Everyone loved her. She had donated a kidney to someone she barely even knew. She had a special needs adopted child. Most of the money she earned was donated to various charities, and that's only the little I knew of her. This woman shined so brightly that she scared me. It was scary that someone could be so good. But it wasn't nearly as scary as the darkest person I ever saw. I was 20 years old at the time, leaving a club downtown at 2 a.m. A man quietly walked down the street. I didn't see him at first, but I noticed the light dimming around me. This man was so dark that he partly absorbed the light around him. I looked at him long and hard. He looked desperate, cruel, and callous. When he looked up and locked eyes with me, it made me fall back. He smirked as though he knew what I could see. I saw his face up close. I would never forget it. And I recognized it when I saw his mugshot a few weeks later in the newspaper. He had murdered his ex-wife and 2 children in cold blood. I think I need to get to it now. The reason why I'm writing this out. I fell in love a year ago. She didn't shine anywhere near as bright as what I've seen before, but she most assuredly was not dark or even dim. She was beautiful. Her sense of humor, her wit, her everything. She was my dream woman. And I've never told her anything at all about the auras I see. I could go far more about her, but this isn't a love story. What's important is this. We fell in love, she got pregnant, we got married. We were happy. We were so happy. I remember hearing the buzz of my phone 2 mornings ago. I remember my excitement when I saw, "It's happening, come to the hospital." I remember my frustration when I got stuck in traffic. I remember how long it took to find a parking spot. I remember shouting at a nurse, "What room is my wife in?" I remember bursting through a door and seeing the smile on my wife's face. I remember seeing the doctor, his light shining so bright as he told me, "Congratulations, it's a boy." The doctor held him up to me, and all the light in the room dissipated. "No, this can't be," I remember saying. The doctor put him in my arms. The darkness around my son was so absolute that I could barely even see him. He was a void. He was so dark that the world barely even existed around him. It was like nothing I'd ever experienced. I started weeping. I think my wife and the doctor thought they were tears of joy, but they weren't. Lord knows they weren't. I think back to the dark outline around that man that murdered his family. It was up to that point the darkest I'd ever seen. But the darkness around my son was 100 times worse. 1,000 times worse. And what could possibly be 1,000 times worse than murdering your entire family? It's been 2 days. We're home now. My son's darkness is so extreme that it dims the hallway leading to his room. My wife knows something is wrong. I think she suspects I'm having regrets about having children at all, if she only knew. What do I do? He's my son. Just 20 minutes ago, I stood above him, holding a pillow over his face. But I couldn't do it. Not yet, anyway. A man who could murder his 2-day-old baby boy, what color would his aura be? And here's a thought that keeps going through my mind as I sit here alone. The fathers of our worst. The Adolf Hitlers. Joseph Stalins. Timothy McVeighs. If their fathers knew what they would become, would they murder them in the cradle? Would they have the strength to hold down the pillow as long as it takes? I can see the door of my son's room from my office. The hallway seems to be growing darker. I look down at my hands as I type this. Maybe I'm going crazy, but there seems to be an aura around my hands and arms now. It's gray. It's dim. Maybe it's always been dim. I'm looking down at the pillow beside me. The grayish, dim outline around my hands is more apparent than ever. Maybe it's time. Maybe this is why I have this gift. It all comes down to right now. Maybe it's time. I think it's time.
It all started after moving into my new house. Yeah, that's pretty cliche. Believe me, I know, but it's what happened. I never experienced anything supernatural before, and though interested, I never really expected anything to happen to me. I was able to rent the house for pretty cheap. I didn't think anything of it because it was old and not in the best of neighborhoods, so I guessed I just got a good deal. After moving everything in, things were fine for a while. I don't remember exactly when it started because it seemed so minor at the time. I'd leave a light on in the kitchen or the bathroom and come back to find it off. Honestly, I thought I was just forgetting that I turned them off already when I came back. After a while, I began to wonder and started leaving on a couple lights on purpose. Sometimes, nothing would happen. Sometimes I'd come back to find the lights turned off. By now, I figured that something was off. I wasn't really scared, but just confused. I thought maybe something was wrong with the electronics. I started leaving lights on a bit more often because I thought I might be able to get some sign of why they would randomly shut off. That's when it started to take another turn. The first real time I remember something crazy happening was when I left the kitchen and living room light on while I was asleep. I woke up to a deep, rumbling growl coming from the kitchen. Now, from the bedroom, you can see down the hall to the living room, and that room is connected to the kitchen. I remember waking up and thinking that there was an animal or something in my house. I looked down the hall toward the living room to see the light darken. Somebody had flicked off the light from the kitchen. Another low growl came, this time from the living room, and I nearly screamed as I saw something bolt across the length of the hall opening. And then the living room light went out. I couldn't tell exactly what it was, though. It just seemed like a black shadow or something. It didn't really matter. I was scared shitless. I bolted from my bed and then threw on the bedroom light, expecting something to be in this room and getting ready to come after me. Nothing. There wasn't anything in the room. I let out a low breath and then I slowly moved down the hall into the living room. Once I got to the end, I practically ran to throw on the light switch there. Again, nothing. Kitchen next, and once again, nothing. I was starting to think I dreamed all of it before I went to turn off the kitchen light and stopped. Now, I was a grown man, but here I was terrified to turn off that switch. And, I'll admit it, I slept with all the lights on that night. That was a mistake. When I woke up the next morning, all the lights were off once again. I went to push myself out of bed and winced as my body felt sore. I pulled the sheets off to see long red marks running down along my legs and arms. It looked like something scratched me in the night. That terrified the hell out of me, but not nearly so much as what I saw around the house. Every light I left on was smashed. Every light bulb that was on last night was broken. Every lamp knocked over and smashed in. My breath caught in my throat as I looked around. Something was fucked up as hell here. And something tried to, well, do something to me. I called in for work that day and went to immediately replace all the lights. I didn't know what to do then. I thought about leaving, but, and I know this probably sounds stupid, but this was my home. It was my first time away from my family, and this was my home. I couldn't give it up. So, I stayed. Even as it got worse. Even though I was beginning to become terrified of the dark, I couldn't really sleep with the light on me at night in the bedroom. I'd leave other lights on, though, like in the hall or the living room, giving myself enough to see pretty well in my darker room. And, almost every night, I'd wake up in the middle of the night to hear something growling and prowling around the living room, and then the lights would shut off. I didn't want to go look. I was terrified at the thought of being in the same room with whatever was in there. So I curled up in my bed and prayed it never came in. One night, after this went on for a while, I had it. I bought a gun and turned on every light in the house. Then I sat down in the middle of the living room with my gun in my lap and a baseball bat sitting next to me. I waited. There was nothing at first for a long time. At around 2 a.m, I began to hear it. Oddly, it was behind me. I turned and peeked toward the hall to my bedroom and could hear that familiar growl. I swallowed and held my gun in one hand and the bat in the other, and slowly began to step around to get a better view of my bedroom from the living room. As I began to get a view of my bed, I heard a loud thump, followed by an inhuman roar. I, being the brave man I was, jumped back and away from the hallway. I wanted to end this all, but dear God, I just didn't want to deal with that thing. I could hear tearing and smashing, and I don't know how I caught it, but I did manage to hear an audible click. And then, nothing. Slowly, I went back to peek down the hall, and the light was off once again. A deep breath, and I ventured forth, my weapons ready. When I came to my bedroom and flicked the light back on, I gasped. My bed was ravaged, torn completely apart. It was like some animal had jumped into it and just ripped it to shreds. I stepped forward to look at what was left in my bed and just stood in shock for who knows when. It wasn't until I heard the sound of a familiar growl that I turned around. Standing near my door, right at the light switch, was when I finally saw it. It was a man. A white and rotting man with a mangled body that looked like he had once been a dog's chew toy staring at me. I was too in shock to even raise my weapons. He stared at me for just a moment and then flicked off the light. I screamed. I'm not even ashamed to admit it. I screamed and bolted. I didn't care if that was where that man had been standing. I ran right past where I'd seen him, swinging my bat like a madman. I nearly put a hole in the hallway as I ran through into the safe light of the hall. I turned to look back then, just in time to see him once again near the hall's light switch. He turned that one off too. By then, I didn't want to fight. I wanted to be safe. I burst past the living room and into the brightness of my kitchen. I heard the sound of growling and scratching nearly all around me then, and I knew he was coming back. I looked back to once again see that mangled and rotten corpse of a man turn off another light with a broken finger and plunge me into terrifying darkness. I broke for the living room. This was going to be my final stand. I'd have to fight here. I drew close to the standing lamp that was my last line of defense. It hated the dark, so I'd stay right here, next to this comforting standing lamp. I waited for it to turn off, but it never did. I looked around and quiet. Nothing but quiet. I turned then to look at that saving grace of a lamp that refused to yield. I started to find myself laughing, a crazy but alive laugh, and I thought I'd finally be okay. I stepped closer, and I swear I almost hugged that lamp. Until I saw it. I heard the growl first coming not from behind me, but in front. From that lamp. My eyes widened and I stared as the light from that lamp intensified. I stumbled back and I don't know what happened, but I think I tripped on something. I just know I found myself flat on my back staring up at that bright, intense light. It wasn't comforting any longer. Just hot and heavy and bright. I thought it was going to burn me away. And then it came. I don't have words to describe what poured from that lamp's light. It was hideous, twisted, and filled with rage. I know I'll never forget those eyes, though. Bright, hot, and white. Two glowing circles of pure malice. It hated me. It hated everything about me. And not just me. It hated all of us. Every human being. But it was stuck here. And it would lash out at what it could. Me. I don't know how I knew this, but I just knew. It lunged for me, and I prepared myself for a painful death. Click. the light went out. Once again came darkness. Sweet, quiet, relaxing darkness. I stayed on the ground for a long moment, letting my eyes adjust as I kept my gaze fixated on where my standing lamp was. As the seconds passed, I could start to make him out. That mangled man standing by the lamp, one torn hand upon the switch as he looked down at me. I understood then. I understood what it all meant. Everything that happened. The man pulled his hand away from it and then pointed a mangled finger toward it before, very clearly, shaking his head from side to side. All I could find myself doing was nodding. He wasn't the one trying to harm me. All this time, all those instances, he was trying to protect me. That creature could only come in the light. And this mangled man had been trying to keep me safe. He didn't want someone else to repeat his mistakes. I moved out the very next day and never looked back. Whatever it was confined to that house, and so far, nothing has come at me from another light source. However, that thing will always stick with me in my mind. Every night in my new apartment, I made a habit of wandering around the house, making sure every light is off, every curtain is closed, and made sure to plunge myself in quiet, comforting, and safe pitch darkness.
The summer before I started school, my mom was hospitalized for an extraordinarily high-risk pregnancy. My dad was pulling double shifts to keep us afloat, which meant no one had time to take care of me. So, they shipped me to my aunt's house, 1,000 miles away. I was excited at first. I was obsessed with the idea of adventure. A real adventure with magical creatures and quests. Maybe this trip would be the catalyst to just such an adventure. By the time we reached my aunt's enormous and breathtakingly beautiful mountain property, I fully believed I was about to embark on my very own fairy tale. The fairy tale dissipated when my father drove away the next morning. I watched his car disappear, trying not to cry and failing miserably. When you are 6 years old, a day feels like a week. A day with strangers feels twice as long, especially when the strangers aren't kind. Aunt Charlotte didn't particularly care for my mother and, by extension, didn't particularly care for me. Nor did her children. Charles and Alan loved nothing more than scaring me to death with stories of serial killers and child-drowning ghosts. They also made it extraordinarily clear that I ranked far below them in the family hierarchy. So, I spent my days roaming the property. Rocky peaks stood sentry in every direction, rising from the landscape like curious giants. Stands of aspens rattled in the wind, snowy bark shining, and the wildflowers, fragrant, multicolored carpets of blossoms spreading across meadows and trailing under the trees where they glowed like dim, warm lights. The outdoors soothed my isolation as effectively as a salve. In late June, the zenith of summer, just before the walloping heat of July burns everything to a dry tangle, I found the neighbor's house, small and run down, with a garbage-strewn lawn. Through an open window, I saw a woman. She didn't look right. Half-lidded eyes stared blankly at the ceiling, and Her mouth hung open. I turned away and continued my hike. There's something sharp in mountain air, a clean wildness that simultaneously heightens your senses and intoxicates you. I drifted through the forest in a delighted haze until a voice broke my reverie. A child's voice, happily singing. I perked up. Fairies and nymphs sang in forests. Maybe I'd found my very own magical creature. Maybe this was the start of my adventure. I ran through the trees. Aspens rattled in my wake, breaking apart suddenly to reveal a murky pond. And in the pond, a little girl with long black hair. I froze. So did she. Sun shafted through the trees, drenching her in golden light. Hi, I said nervously. My name's Rachele. I held up my fingers. I'm 6. The girl's eyes shone, large and dark, yet somehow golden, like sunlight glancing off tar. I'm Lorelei, and I'm a mermaid. I stepped closer, feet crunching on twigs and leaves. I've never met a mermaid. I'm the last one. My mother told me. She swanned across the pond, stopping just short of the edge. Is your mom a mermaid? No, just human. She had 5 kids, all mermaids. Every last one died except me. Shocked tears burned my eyes. All of them? All of them, she intoned. It's not her fault. She didn't know her kids were mermaids, but she finally figured it out in time to save me. Do you live in the water? Yes, for 10 hours a day. I come in at night since I'm scared of the dark. That's because I'm not all the way mermaid yet. She ducked underwater and erupted with a glittering splash. When I'm all the way mermaid, nothing will scare me. What do you mean, not all the way mermaid? I crept closer. The earth was dangerously soft under my feet, like it might crumble into the water. Lorelei was clearly enjoying herself. Mermaids look like humans unless they spend lots of time in the water. Water washes away the human part so the mermaid part can come out. I have to be in the water at least 10 hours. She held up her own small, wrinkly fingers. Every day, or I'll get sick and die. When will you become full mermaid? Soon. She swam to the other end, once more stopping several inches short of the shore. Mom says changing hurts, and I hurt everywhere. Oh, I'm sorry. Lorelei smiled radiantly. Don't be. When I'm a mermaid, I'll find a special tunnel at the bottom of the pond. It leads to the ocean, but only mermaids can see it. I can't wait. Have you seen the ocean? Yes, I said. My dad takes me to Cabrillo Beach. Where's that? California. Her eyes went wide and she clapped her hands. I noticed that they were covered in swollen red bumps like bug bites. You're from California? We spent the rest of the afternoon discussing the California coast. I'll come see you when I'm a mermaid, Lorelei promised. You can't be scared though. Full mermaids aren't pretty, but we're really nice, if you give us a chance. I'll give you lots of chances. You're the nicest person I've ever met. Nicest mermaid, she corrected, and laughed. I visited Lorelei every morning and left just before sunset. That's when her mom came to fetch her. I had to leave before then because she'd be furious that I'd discovered Lorelei's secret. Every day, I brought chips, sandwiches, and drawings of mermaids. We sang nursery rhymes and lullabies, the Blues Clues theme, and original compositions. Mostly, we talked. We discussed everything: California, the ocean, fairy tales, the forest, her dead siblings, and my forthcoming brother. You need to check if he's a mermaid, she said seriously. If he is, you have to put him in the water so he doesn't die. How can you tell? My mom says you have to listen to your lizard brain, Lorelei answered. It knows. That night, I dreamt of drowned babies and long, sinuous lizards crawling out of my eyes to whisper strange secrets in my ear. Lorelei was a welcomed break from everything else. From my cousins who constantly tormented me and scared me to death with the ghost stories, from my aunt who ignored me, and from my own fears, which ate me alive unless I was with Lorelei. As June bled into July and July hobbled into a breathless and suffocating August, I realized Lorelei was the best friend I ever had. I told her so one afternoon as I lay belly down on the damp shore. She gave me a tired smile. I figured she must have been close to becoming full mermaid because she looked awful, bone thin with dark hollows under her eyes and broken teeth. "You're the only friend I've ever had." "How so? You're so nice." She swam over, stopping several inches short of the edge as always. She was so close I could smell her breath, which was ghastly. "People are scared of mermaids. That's why Mom hides me. But being friends with a mermaid is super lucky." She took my hand. Her skin was cold and somehow thin, like a fish belly, white and nearly translucent, except for the angry red welts and mosquito bites. "I'll make you the luckiest person in the world, I promise." The prospect of mermaid luck made me so giddy I couldn't contain myself. When I got home that night, I regaled everyone with tales of my mermaid friend, Lorelei. Charlotte exchanged a worried glance with her husband. Then Charles snorted with laughter. "A mermaid? Stupid." "Charles, what?" He coughed again. "She's talking about mermaids. Her imaginary friend is so stupid it lives in stagnant water," Alan added. "No," I stood up angrily. "Her name is Lorelei and she's real. I'll show you right now." But nobody wanted to tromp across several woodland acres in the growing dark because nobody believed in mermaids. Nobody except me. Over the following days, Lorelei's condition deteriorated severely. Mosquito bites peppered her water-wrinkled skin. Strange, puffy welts snaked over her body. Her long hair became a haven for water bugs and detritus. "I feel these things in my skin." She extended her rashy, welt-covered arm. "I think I have bugs inside me." She grimaced. "When I'm a mermaid, I'll be poisonous to bugs. They'll never bite me again." Looking at her, the skeletal form, the stark, almost inhuman sharpness of her face, made me want to cry. "I wish I could help you." "You do," she assured me. "You'll be here when I turn into a mermaid, and you'll show me how to get to California." She took my hands. Hers were terribly weak and cold. "You should go. It's almost sunset." Thick golden light drowned the world in an ethereal haze, but sure enough, shadows were growing, devouring that light before my eyes. "Okay. See you tomorrow, Lorelei." "See you tomorrow, Rachel." That gilded sunlight lay over her like a blanket. It erased the sickness and ugliness, leaving a small, dark-haired angel. A real mermaid. As I left, she broke into a song. The melody echoed through the forest. For so long, it could have been magic. That night, Charles scared me with his favorite ghost story. Alan insisted he'd seen the ghost in question, a rail-thin woman draped in white, drifting through the trees outside my window. They brought me to tears. Then they told me they were going ghost hunting and I had to come along. They forced me into the forest. Heavy shadows blanketed the trees, black, blue, and deep ominous purple, thick as curtains. Finally, we stopped in a clearing. Aspens ringed the little meadow, glimmering weirdly like skinny ghosts full of unblinking eyes. They poured a ring of salt in an uneven circle and chanted. Their voices filled the night, underscored by the light wind and the eerie rattle of the leaves. "Weeping Lady of the Woods," Charles finally bellowed. "We summon you now." Silence. Then, a sound. High, miserable, and broken. Sobbing. My cousins froze. The weeping continued, a haunting, atonal melody bleeding through the night. Charles ran and Alan followed. I watched them go frozen to the spot until the sobbing broke my paralysis. I tore after them, expecting long white hands to reach out of the darkness and pull me away. We ran for what felt like hours. When the house finally came into sight, I had a second of relief before I tripped and skidded down the slope. A tree trunk hurtled towards me like a rocket. Then, everything went dark. I woke up in a hospital. Minor skull fracture and a concussion, but otherwise okay. I went home 3 days later. 3 days after that, I crept out of the house to see Lorelei. On my way to the pond, I entered an aspen-ringed clearing. My feet crunched weirdly. I looked down and saw a dirty, uneven ring of salt. This was where my cousins held their stupid séance. Just a few minutes later, I saw the pond glimmering through the trees. Relief and excitement coursed through me. "Lorelei!" Nothing. The water shone, a field of gold interrupted by mosquitoes and waterbugs. "Lorelei?" I circled the pond, dread building with every step. I called and eventually screamed, but there was no point. Lorelei was gone. She'd turned into a mermaid, and I'd missed it. She'd never get to California now. I sat down and wept for hours. Toward sunset, a shrill wail shocked me out of my daze. Fear coiled in my guts as it sounded again. Not a wail, a siren. I followed the sound to that broken-down little house. Flashing lights drenched the trees in red and blue. The window, still wide open, blazed with light. Paramedics loaded an inert body onto a stretcher and carried it outside to the ambulance. A police radio crackled and a cop looked up. Had it not been for the trees, she would have seen me. Maybe they were looking for me. I'd run away even though I had a skull fracture and was supposed to stay in bed. Maybe they'd arrest me. I tiptoed into the forest and went home. By the time I reached my aunt's house, dark had long since fallen. I felt sick and dizzy, and my head throbbed with every step. Everyone was waiting for me. Cousins, aunt, and uncle, and, to my horror, a policeman. My aunt stormed over. I thought she was going to hit me. Instead, she gathered me into a hug and held me tight. This is what they told me. The neighbor was a mentally ill drug addict who overdosed several days before. A welfare check from her landlord led to the discovery of her body. She had 5 children. 3 were in foster care. 1 died of SIDS. The last, a girl named Lorelei, was officially missing. A filthy, bed-bug-infested bedroom indicated that a child lived in that house. It was covered in mermaid memorabilia, including several pictures I'd drawn for her. But they couldn't find her. I told them about the pond. Their horrified expressions were at odds with the hysterical relief I felt. "It's because she's a mermaid. She turned into a mermaid and swam to California." They searched the pond that night. At the bottom was an algae-slick block of granite. chained to the block, was the corpse of an emaciated little girl with long black hair. It's been 20 years. I can't shake the memory of the seance, of the shrill crying echoing in the darkness. I was stupid enough to believe it was a ghost. But it was just a little girl who was scared of the dark.
To start off with, I now reside in a completely different state after leaving my job with the Walt Disney World Resort in Orlando. I used to be what some would describe as a suit. I'm one of the guys that walk around the park in plain sight, yet hidden to the public. I'm part of the elite group of black polo sporting undercover security officers that specialize in worse things than shoplifters and unruly park guests. You see, if you're at Disney World and you see more than a few guys in one place wearing black polos, then you're most likely in danger, and you should leave the area immediately. The sad part is, we're so good at blending in with the woodwork that you wouldn't even notice us. Anyway, let me cut to the chase here. I've seen some pretty weird things at Disney World during my time. The so-called anomalies that everyone speaks of, well, they're true, but the least of our concerns. See, the thing is, when you take hundreds of thousands of people and cram them into a relatively small space, weird shit is going to happen. We've had kids, adults even, get lost in the park. Cryptozoological sightings, alien sightings, ghost sightings, you name it. We've seen it. Generally speaking, unexplainable things happen all the time. At the height of my time there, I was a senior special security officer and I got called for some pretty dark shit. Many of you imagine we, as in the security detail I was in, were covering up for Disney Corp. But in actuality, we were damage control, and were kept out of the loop on things, and were trained not to question, but to diffuse. There was one thing, though, that still bothers me to this day. One day, a cast member, as the Disney staff are called, rang us on the Nextel to report that a group of 4 children had gone missing on an eerily calming nature ride called Living with the Land. Another one of those anomalies, I figured. The odd thing about the cast member's report was that up until that point, my team and I had never received that particular type of complaint before. Of course, that made no difference. We had protocol to follow. As per usual, we were issued a cover story from higher up and asked to recite it to any witnesses to the events, both cast members and guests alike. Alan, a colleague of mine, recited the official narrative to the cast member who had called in the incident. Calmly, he explained it to her that the kids they had seen were part of an educational program, and that they had exited the boat with a guide and had been escorted into the botany lab that exists on the ride. I approached the cast member myself then, and advised her refrain from speaking of the incident or asking any further questions, so as not to spread fake news. Then Alan escorted her to a nearby security office to be debriefed and to sign a few forms. A new cast member, unaware of the details of the incident, arrived shortly afterwards to replace the one who had made the report. At that point, my curious nature had gotten the better of me, and I approached the cast member telling him I needed him to put some space between the next 2 boats, as I would be searching for a lost wedding ring. He bought my explanation, and a few moments later, I caught the next boat and entered the ride, alone. Now, for those unfamiliar with the ride, Living with the Land is boring and not particularly popular, so the fact that kids had been alone on the ride at the time of their disappearance was not surprising. It was also the reason I was certain no one would see what I was about to do. A few minutes into the ride, I came to the part of it which features a realistic prairie farmhouse. I don't know what it is about the scene, but no matter how many times I've seen it for myself, something about it just never sat right with me. In any event, as I had done hundreds of times before on rides, I jumped off the boat and into the set where the house was located. That's when I noticed something unusual. There were no pressure mats, and the boat drifted away. A solid 30 seconds passed before the next boat arrived at the scene. Until that point, I had never seen a ride with its pressure mats disabled. For the unaware, the mats are used to detect if and when anyone disembarks a ride. I shrugged it off, and slowly I started to walk up to the house. Climbing the steps up to the porch, I noticed a small emblem on the left window. A small square and compass, which I immediately recognized as a Masonic symbol. Interesting, I thought, that it had been hidden there, of all places. I figured whoever built the ride was a Freemason, and brushed it off. I looked in the windows of the house and saw that there was nothing but curtains with black plywood behind them. Seemed as though there was nothing to see, but something deep inside me encouraged me to keep looking. The front door glided open to a bright room with a black and white checkerboard floor. There was a marble, altar-like table on the opposite end of the room with some kind of weird throne-like chair built into the front of it and a golden cup atop the table. The only other thing of note was a heavy wooden door on the other end of the room. There were no windows. The sight was beyond strange. I'd always been under the impression that the house was fake. Again, I was overwhelmed with curiosity. Against my better judgment, I tried the door in the room. Not surprisingly, it was locked. Refusing to take no for an answer, however, I tried my keys, but none of them worked. Here's the thing. At Disney, we use a lock system called BEST, which utilizes interchangeable cores which have assigned numbers or letters or a combination of them. This allows us to limit access to certain areas. I have the General Master Key, which is, essentially, an honest-to-God key to the kingdom. The interesting thing about this lock was that my master didn't open it. I inspected the lock more closely. Sure enough, it was a BEST lock. However, the inscription on it read CC, which I'd never seen before. Having hit a dead end, I turned to leave. On my way out, I noticed a fast pass for another attraction, Soarin', lying on the ground. I picked it up and pocketed it. It's amazing how trash works its way into odd places, I thought. I was determined to figure out where the kids went. I rode the boat back out to the platform and went back to the Epcot security office to replay some footage from the DVR. It took a while, but I was able to zero in on the exact moment when the missing kids had entered the Land and Sea Pavilion and followed them. There were 4 of them total, 3 girls and a boy, and a 5th person, a man, escorting them through the building. I watched as the group lumbered through the pavilion in a straight line. The girls' actions were unusually robotic. Simply watching them sent a chill up my spine. What frightened me the most, however, was their unidentified male escort. I paused and looked closer when I realized the man, like me, was outfitted in a black polo and khakis. Holy shit, I thought, realizing I recognized him. It was my colleague, Alan, the guy that arrived at the scene before I did. The same guy who fed the cast member at the control podium BS about the kids going on a tour. For a moment, I thought maybe he had actually sent them on the tour of the Botanic Lab and lost track of them. Until I hit play on the film. On the screen, I watched as the boy refused to walk in line. I could tell he was giving Alan problems. He kept venturing away and getting distracted by various things in the pavilion. Until then, I'd given Alan the benefit of the doubt. That changed, however, when I saw the kid press the button for the fast pass on Soarin' and retrieve the paper like it was some sort of prize. Alan tugged the boy away and stood back, observing the other kids as they made their way to living with the land. I saw everyone get on the boat. They remained visible throughout the storm scene, through the rainforest scene, then through the desert scene. After the desert, I lost sight of the boat. I noticed then, as verified from the other scenes, that the ride had stopped momentarily. Once it resumed, I saw the boat reemerge in the scene with the pictures of farmers. It was empty. I also saw Alan looking down from the observation deck, which explains how he'd been able to respond so quickly. I switched the cameras back to live view and left the area. Now, I haven't been exactly honest with you thus far. I know about a lot of things Disney does, about things that my team responds to, which a regular security officer wouldn't deal with. I've witnessed eugenics experiments, pharmaceutical engineering, even experiments with gas. Have you ever noticed that on both Spaceship Earth and the monorail, that you get a strange, calm feeling on those rides? Well, they're pumping low doses of laughing gas in those areas. Ever heard of Room Zero? They were wearing gas masks for a reason. Ever hear of gas gots? Well, that's not important right now. But I would encourage you to research it. I know I'm the bad guy. I never thought that what we did by containing these dark secrets was okay, but the job paid well. And so I kept my mouth shut when I witnessed guests being injected with experimental drugs and released, after which point it was our job to monitor and contain them if things got out of control. All things considered, what I saw the day of the kid's disappearance wasn't procedural. It wasn't normal, relatively speaking. So the first thing I did was go over to the room where we kept the keys. I looked through the logbooks for the core labeled CC. I found it, but it had no zone or specific location issued to the core, and the number of copies was marked as 1. The key was in our system, but my master key didn't open it. So I grabbed the core key and a few Zone 1 cores. The core key is a specific key that, when inserted into the lock, removes the core so it can be replaced with another. I put it in my pocket and made a beeline for the Land and Sea Pavilion. I might have been paranoid, but I swear I saw Alan following me in the shadows. I got to the ride and made my way to the house and back to the front door leading to the Masonic room, and locked the front door as I entered. I inserted the core key into the lock on the wooden door, removed the core, and inserted the Zone 1 core back into the lock. Now my master key would open the door, and boy did it ever work like a charm. The door glided open. It was heavy, with steel opposite its wood face. On the other side of the door, I discovered a red velvet staircase leading down to some kind of utilidor. For the unacquainted, the utilidors are short for utility corridors. They're part of the backstage area in Disney's theme parks, and their purpose is to allow cast members to perform park support operations such as trash removal out of the sight of guests so as to avoid ruining the illusions of perfection the company tries so hard to create. What the hell, I thought. We were in Epcot. There was one small utilidor in Epcot, but it didn't go that deep. Slowly I descended the stairs and walked down the red-carpeted hallway to a pair of double doors. Behind those doors was the answer I'd been searching for. The truth of what happened to the kids. Behind those doors was the darkest side of Disney, a side that even I couldn't believe. Would Walt be in favor of what I'd seen? Or was it one of Eisner's ideas, intended to make money off his guests? Behind these doors was a dimly lit room, carpeted with the same lush red velvet I'd seen in the hallway. The room was empty, with the exception of a small circular platform positioned in the center, surrounded by 6 leather armchairs, each with their own telephone and a card reader on a small table beside them. Inside, I knew what was going on. I knew what was happening here. This is one thing I will not cover up for the Disney Corp. I stood there in disbelief and horror and noticed a small door towards the back of the room. I went over and popped out the CC core, put it in my pocket, and put in a Zone 1 core. That's when I heard someone clear their throat from the front of the room. It was Alan, armed with a gun which he had trained on me. He had a look of annoyance on his face. I slowly propped the door open on the latch and turned to face him. "You never should have come here," he said as he approached me. "So this is what you and your scumbag friends resorted to," I retorted. "We did some pretty fucked up shit, Alan, but this is a new low for you and your disgusting friends." I had my hand at my side and blocked the view of me slipping the Zone 1 core out of the handle and into my pocket. "It's not going to matter, because no one is going to find out." Alan raised the gun, and like something out of an action movie, I ripped the door open as he pulled the trigger. I jumped backwards through the doorway and shut it behind me just in time to hear the bullet ping off the steel. I had both cores in my pocket, so I knew there was no way Alan could open the door. He was stuck. Realizing his predicament, he started shooting the door. Meanwhile, I moved forward, walking down a hallway with small cell-like rooms lining the corridor. Inside, I could see play school chairs and a few toys. I checked every single one of them, and they were all empty. I reached the end of the hall and came upon a huge metal vault-like door. I popped the last Zone 1 core into the door to replace the CC core and pulled the steel door open, and was promptly blinded by sunlight. I found myself outside alongside some utility road off premises of Epcot, leading off into the distance. I was too late. The kids were already gone for good. I called the police, but they never came. I called the FBI, but they never took me seriously. Hell, I even called the CIA, but they said they didn't deal with domestic issues like that and referred me back to the FBI. I showed up at the Orange County Police Department's headquarters and they took a report, but I heard something fall in the trash while I was leaving. If you go to a Disney park, please keep your kids close. Watch out for the men in the black polos. They may be monitoring you. They may be responding to something that will put you in danger. As far as I know, they aren't the ones that pick out the merchandise. I don't know who does that, but that doesn't really matter. Disney is good at what they do. They are good at keeping secrets, and they are good at controlling any outside force that attempts to bring their secrets to light. I am lucky I saw the sunlight again, and I am lucky to have had time to leave the state before they got to me. Not everyone is so lucky.
Chilling tales for dark nights.